So we're back on the same screen we just finished because I want you to notice what happens in the paragraph that begins here. I am writing to you, children, vocative. And then we finish translating it, because your sins have been forgiven for you on account of his name. Now watch what happens as it all continues. So we've just had the children. And now we're going to get, I am writing to you, fathers. I am writing to you, young people. I am writing to you, children. I am writing to you, fathers. I am writing to you, young people. Okay, so we get the same sequence 3 times. Children, fathers, neoniskoi. The other word for children was teknia. So teknia, fathers, young people. Paideia, a different word that still means children. Fathers, young people. Now, we should read fathers as parents or older, more mature people. We should read neoniskoi not as men in particular. It could be young man, depending on the context, but in the context of writing to a church, he's just thinking of the younger people, people that wouldn't be considered parents or the fathers or the older people. And then teknia and paideia, I think we should view them as interchangeable, not 2 different ages of children. What's not so obvious is whether or not these terms are actually talking about age at all. Are these people who are literally parents, people who are in the youth group, and people who are in kids' Sunday school? Not impossible, but it might also just refer to different stages in the Christian life. So there are those who are just beginning on the journey. John calls them children. There are those who are farther along. He calls them young people, young in the faith. And then the pateres would be the older, more mature ones, not necessarily older, but longer in the faith. So it's not quite clear. I think I would go more likely with stages of spiritual maturity, which would only sometimes correspond to ages, especially if they're growing up within the church. Okay, so that's the structure of it. It's kind of a poetic structure. So these are all vocatives. I am writing to you, fathers. I am writing to you, young people. This is where it changes. Okay, so the first 3 were I am writing to you. The one we saw on the last screen, I am writing to you. Here, I am writing to you. And then the last 3 are I wrote to you. I wrote to you. I wrote to you, going through the same thing. So we're going to see in a minute what he wrote. But first of all, why the shift of tense from I am writing to I wrote? So there's 2 possibilities. One possibility is that he's referring to a previous letter. So he is now writing because of these 3 things. But previously he wrote for very similar reasons. I think that's the less likely interpretation. In English, we would never say I wrote if you're referring to what you are presently writing. You wouldn't write somebody an email and say, I wrote this email on my phone. Well, maybe you would. More likely you'd say, I'm writing this email on my phone. Maybe you have an automated message at the end that says, this was written on my phone. The point is, which tense would we use when we write? Normally in English, we use the tense of the person who's doing the writing. So I would say, I am recording this video on March 16th. But I don't anticipate you're watching this video on March 16th. You're probably watching it close to the beginning of April. And so in Greek, the author could say, I am recording this video on March 16th. But more likely, he would use what's called the epistolary aorist. He would shift to the aorist tense as a letter writing style in order not to use time from his perspective, but from theirs. So for example, I would then say, if I was doing this in Greek, I recorded this video on March 16th. Because when you watch it, that will be in the past. And so the time frame will sound right to you. Here's Tim saying that he recorded it on March 16th. So it's called the epistolary aorist. It's an author shifting the tense in order to line up with the experience of the readers or hearers rather than his own at the time that he's speaking or writing. It's common, happens a lot in Paul's writings. It creates a little bit of problem because sometimes Paul will say, I sent Timothy to you, and we can't tell from his sentence whether he's referring to a previous visit where Timothy was sent to them, or whether he's actually talking about Timothy bringing the letter that he's currently writing. I sent Timothy. He hasn't sent him yet at the time that he says this, but he knows that by the time they read it, it'll be past for them, and so he uses the aorist tense. Here, I strongly suspect that this is present tense because he's presently writing, and this is aorist tense because he just decides to shift to their perspective because it will be past by the time they read it. And therefore, all six of them mean the same thing. They're all referring to the present letter. That's the way it's usually taken. Older translations will make a difference between I am writing and I wrote. Newer translations are more likely to say I am writing all 6 times. All right, that takes care of the introductions. I am writing to you, I'm writing to you, I wrote to you, I wrote to you, I wrote to you. Takes care of the addresses. But what exactly is it that he's writing to them, or at least why? The previous sentence on the previous page said, I am writing to you, children, because your sins have been forgiven for his name's sake. I suppose you could translate this as that. I'm writing to you, children, that your sins have been forgiven for you. Not through, according to his name. More likely, however, that it's because and not that. He's not informing them of all these things. He's saying why he's writing this letter. So let's look at the rest of the addresses. So I am writing to you, fathers, older Christians, parents, however we interpret it, because of this. You have known the from the beginning person. So this is a prepositional phrase with an article in front. We saw this earlier. Who is this person? The speaking person, the one who speaks. But who's this person? The in the house person. It's what I like to call the bracket use of the article. So in this expression, it's the from the beginning person, presumably referring to God. You have known God, the one who is from the beginning. So this egnokate, we've seen this word before. There's the sign of the perfect. There's the reduplication. Because there's 2 consonants at the beginning of the stem, the author can choose whether to just reduplicate the first one or neither, and just put an epsilon in front as a reduplication. So I am writing to you, fathers, because you have known, and therefore you now know, the from the beginning one. I am writing to you, young people, because you did this to the evil one. So this is an adjective, but it's substantivized. It's turned into a substantive by putting an article in front of the adjective. The one who is evil, the evil one. So what did they do to the evil one? Here's the verb. Anybody recognize Nike? This is in fact exactly where Nike got its name. It's the word for being victorious, for conquering, lots of different words related to it. So the Greek word for to conquer is nikao. It's an alpha contract verb. And that's what this verb is made from. So the contracting vowel gets lengthened. The reduplication at the beginning, the ka, so that's the perfect form of nikao. So, young people, because you have conquered, and therefore you are now conquerors. Therefore you are now the victors. You have conquered the evil one. I wrote to you, or you could say, I am writing to you, children, because, and now we get almost the same as we did for the fathers. You have known the from the beginning one, and here you have known the Father. The shift perhaps is that he's addressing fathers, so he doesn't call God Father here, because he's already called them Father. Here, children have gotten to know